What wedding moment screamed, they are not going to last long? It's the cake smash for me. Kiss of death, my friends. I'm a wedding photographer, and I would say the intensity in which a bride and groom shove cake in each other's faces directly correlates to how long I think they'll last. I understand this is not the case for everyone. Don't come at me if you and your spouse did this and are happily married, but it's just what I've seen. Next story. The bride refused to come out of the bathroom because she noticed the clock hands were going upward and that was a bad sign. So we all had to wait half an hour, during which time she sent for several of her friends, me included, to keep her company. She finally decided she could do this now, and when we returned to our seats, half the guests were drunk and milling around, including her mom and the groom. They lasted less than 3 months. Next story. Oh, let's see. Many moments. The caterers ran out of food halfway through serving guests. Turns out the groom had scaled the order down behind the bride's back because he thought it cost too much. Groom got super drunk. Bride's family is Hawaiian and her mother had leis shipped from Hawaii, which included a gorgeous mailele for the groom. At the end of the night, he had lost it or thrown it in the hotel pool. Next morning, the bride shared that he was drunkenly mentioning divorce before passing out. Took her 2 additional years, but eventually they did divorce. Next story. I posted this story someplace else. My wife and I were invited to a neighbor's wedding. We didn't know the bride at all, but we knew the groom and he's a pretty good guy. At the reception after the wedding, the bride was making her way from table to table trying to visit everyone. My wife and I were sitting with the groom's family. The bride sat down and the groom's mom introduced us to her. She was winded from dancing and partying, but she was very critical of the facility's staff. She said clear enough for the groom's mom to hear, "Things are going to be different in my next wedding." You could have heard a pin drop. Look, I think there is a way you can pull this off. There's a way you can say that as a complete joke and it's hilarious. One of the funniest things you could say on your wedding day. But if you seem genuinely upset and then say that just gives off the most atrocious vibes. Next story. The groomsman got into a food fight with the wedding cake, interrupting the groom feeding the bride. He beamed the groom on the head with the couple's cake topper sculpture. The groom was so drunk he could barely stand upright, pivoting from feeding the bride to hurling cake, then doing a literal face plant on the ground after slipping on cake and blood from his cake topper head injury bleeding profusely. The bride was mortified. Her very expensive gown covered in very expensive fondant with no top for the year anniversary celebration. An ambulance took the groom and any hope of a functional marriage away. The marriage was annulled the next week. The father of the bride sued the groom for the wedding costs, getting back some of the loss. Next story. I got a wedding invitation from a female friend, and the groom was a guy I also knew. I haven't even heard they were dating, much less engaged. It sounded shady right from then. I went to the wedding. It was an enormous extravaganza in a huge church with 1 million bridesmaids and groomsmen, lavish reception, just over the top everything. And neither family was particularly well off. Come to find out, he was newly in the military and was posted to the UK. The rumor was that she just wanted to live abroad and had conned him into the marriage so she could go with him. It didn't last 6 months. Next story. 2 examples. Both times I was working the wedding. 1. Groom was 17 and bride was 15. In my state, that's legal with parental consent on the 17-year-old's part and court consent on the 15-year-old's part. I had no idea until I showed up at the venue. 2. Both adults this time. Bride wants a princess wedding. No problem, she's been dreaming of this her whole life probably. The groom and most of the groomsmen show up absolutely crap-faced. The groom had to be helped down the aisle, he was so drunk. At the reception, one of the already drunk groomsmen tried to keep giving me shots because he thought my camera was awesome. Okay, I feel like if you have to be carried down the aisle, you are not in a right state of mind to sign anything, right? Like, you can't really get married because you can't give your sign off on anything when you're that inebriated, surely. There has to be something about that, right? And also, having to qualify the start of that with both adults this time? Horrifying. I never want those words anywhere near talk about a wedding again, unless it is followed up by obviously. Next story. The reception is at a country club. The cake cutting is Pop's side. He puts the cater piece in her mouth. She wipes his face with a piece of cake. He pushes her in the pool in the deep end. Her brother has to jump in and get her out of the pool. The happy couple are now screaming at each other. The families are now screaming at each other. Some guests took their presents home with them. Next story. Prior to the wedding. Her second marriage by mid-20s. Couldn't pronounce his last name properly. Cheated on him multiple times while blackout drunk, but projected those insecurities and decisions onto him during the wedding. The minister tried to start the wedding, "We are gathered here today," without her even walking down the aisle yet. Her dad, directly after their vows, stated, "They won't make it." Her new father-in-law got blackout and stole items from groomsmen changing room, and the icing on the cake was that she chose a horse farm as their wedding venue. Groom, highly allergic to horses. Girl, what do you mean you can't pronounce his last name? That's gonna be yours! Next story. She wanted to invite only part of his family. Her family all got invites. Before the wedding, she invited all of his family to a bridal shower where they got lots of presents. After the wedding, she was complaining about a lack of gifts from his side. They got divorced after a year and 10 months of marriage. She claims she's unhappy. Next story. He said the wrong name in the vows. I know this sounds like I'm just rehashing Ross and Emily's wedding from Friends, but this legit happened at a wedding of a friend of a friend. I was a friend's plus one. Apparently he said the name of the maid of honor, aka the bride's much younger sister. I never found out if there was any kind of affair happening. I asked around a bit, but not much because I didn't know many people there. But I did hear from my friend later that they were divorced less than 3 months later. Next story. During the wedding planning, the bride insisted on there to be no children, including the 2 the groom already had. No amount of talking, attempt at compromise, or reason got her to budge. Turned out all the small children on her side of the family were allowed, and just not his. She also insisted on an outdoor ceremony in late October in the mountains of upstate Pennsylvania. It snowed for a few days before, so it was freezing, but also had warmed up enough that everything was a muddy mess. All of the wedding guests had to rent cabins near the wedding venue because it was hours away from where everyone lived. The bride's parents were long divorced, but couldn't stand being anywhere near each other, and her stepmother thought the whole weekend was all about her. The wedding party gathered at the mother of the groom's cabin the night before because it was the largest. The bride's father and stepmother got pissed drunk, trashed the whole cabin, and laughed about the mother and grandmother of the groom cleaning up, all while the bride's mother spewed a ton of hatred and passive-aggressive death threats throughout the night. At the reception, the bride's father was wasted again, shocker, and proceeded to scream and yell at the 13-year-old brother of the groom for skipping the shot in the dollar dance. The groom's mother had to be held back from knocking his teeth down his throat for all of his drunken antics, especially after having the nerve to threaten her son. The bride got mad and wanted to leave early because she was offended that she wasn't getting enough respect from the groom's family. Never mind the fact that he barely had any family there at all, and they were all doing their best to avoid the raging terror that was her pathetically drunk father, bridal gown wearing stepmother, and bipolar rampaging mother. The marriage lasted 8 months. I was the mother of the groom. Every bit of this story is the God's honest truth. I tried to warn my son about what he was getting himself into, but he wouldn't listen. I had to grin and bear it best I could. I'm just lucky I didn't leave there with a felony charge for knocking that SOB for attacking my son. The whole family was a nightmare, and thankfully my granddaughters didn't have to put up with it for long. Next story. Cousin's wedding. Big, expensive ceremony and reception at a fancy country club on Long Island because they wanted a Great Gatsby-themed wedding. I don't know why they felt the story lent itself to a celebration of love. All I know is that I got yelled at every time I pointed out it seemed like a bad omen. Turns out it was just an excuse to create an ostentatious event, which, in my experience, doesn't bode well for the longevity of a marriage. So, not looking good from the jump. Cut to their vows, which they wrote themselves. My cousin gets up and starts talking about how the groom seems to like her dumb jokes and how much they love pumpkin spice, so naturally they should get married. I turn to my wife and say, oof, I give him 6 months if that's all she's got. Get a smack on the shoulder. Then the groom's turn comes. He starts talking about how often they make each other laugh and how much they both like pumpkin spice. Despite writing their vows in isolation, they both came to the same conclusion that bad jokes and pumpkin spice were all they had. I said, never mind, 3 months. They were divorced 2 months later. Turns out they'd never discussed how they would handle money or whether they wanted kids, or literally anything substantive over the course of their several-year relationship, and they came down on opposite sides of every single issue. A mutual fondness for pumpkin spice isn't enough, it turns out. Next story. During the speeches at the reception, the father of the groom got up and gave a speech that started with him saying, "When Bob told me he'd met Mary, I thought, oh, that's a good thing, because that means he's not that way." The groom thought it was hilarious and laughed his butt off, and so did I, to be honest, until I realized he was serious. The bride was staring absolute daggers at her now father-in-law and husband. Lo and behold, it only lasted a few years before ending in tears for all involved. Next story. During pre-cana classes, Catholic marriage prep, they asked everyone 10 main topic questions several times. Each time they were worded differently to make sure that each couple had discussed these topics thoroughly and were on the same page. For example, one of the topics was on having children. These are some of the questions I remember. Do you want to have children? If so, how many children? Who will be the main caregiver? Will you both equally share parenting duties? Will both parents work full-time? Will you have one stay-at-home parent? If both parents work full-time, will your child be in a daycare facility, or will a family member or other caregiver care for your child inside your home? Etc. We started out with maybe 30 couples, but as time went on, we lost quite a few. It was pretty obvious which couples hadn't discussed anything or just glossed over stuff. We watched several couples get into big arguments, and a few of them actually walked out during the classes. The others just didn't return the following week. One couple almost threw down arguing over spanking their future kids. Next story. The groom drunk dialed me about 6 weeks before the wedding after asking me to be his best woman at the wedding and told me through nearly inaudible slurs that he always loved me. Things would be different if you hadn't moved away. Yeah, no, buddy. They actually postponed the wedding due to a sick parent and eloped. Divorced 2 years later. Next story. I was at a wedding about 10 or 15 years ago where the bride's sister was the maid of honor. When it was time for the speeches, the sister took the microphone and started talking about the first time she met the groom. At first, there was nothing unusual about the story. She threw in a couple of the usual good-natured jabs that always get thrown in during wedding speeches. From there, it went downhill really fast. She went on roasting the groom for about 10 minutes, not in a good-natured way. It was a lot more mean-spirited than any wedding speech I've ever heard. By the time she was finished, it was very apparent to everyone there that she absolutely hated the groom, didn't support the marriage, didn't want to be there, and wished her sister was marrying pretty much anyone but the groom. The couple is still married. When my wife and I occasionally see them, I'm always tempted to ask the bride how her sister is doing just to see both of their reactions. Next story. The bride got super drunk the morning of and presumably kept drinking the whole day. She spilled nacho cheese on her dress and stumbled all the way down the aisle. That night, her and the groom were apparently staying in a fancy hotel or something like that. He left to get something, I don't know, but she apparently locked the door and subsequently blacked out. He wasn't able to get back in the room and was furious. Probably been about 10 years since then. They have 3 kids together and are in the process of a very ugly, very messy divorce. Next story. Young girl that my wife worked with and became friends with. The groom did an elaborate choreographed dance with his mom to the Be a Man song from Mulan. Cringe as hell. Then did the most boring, awkwardly enthusiastic, high school prom-style slow dance with his bride. If that wasn't bad enough, she had called my wife a few weeks prior crying about how he wouldn't rehearse a dance with her. He was 25, she was 20. Unsurprisingly, the mama's boy wanted her to be a trad wife and do all the housework for him and start popping out babies. Meanwhile, dude could barely support the two of them and kept needing mom and dad to bail them out. She divorced him and I'm very proud of her for it. I don't really understand how it gets to this point. How do two people decide to get married and not understand the other seemingly at all? Anyway, she was young, so good for her for getting out of there while the going was still good. Or, good for her, I mean. The going between them did not seem great. Next story. As a wedding photographer, I've seen so many. Few that immediately stand out. Different weddings. 1. Groom had been on a 24-hour coke party and was gurning his way through the ceremony. So much so that I had to wait until his mouth was closed as my indicator to take a picture. 2. Bride was proper hammered after the wedding and was dirty dancing with everyone. And I mean everyone. In particular, the saxophonist. They both disappeared for about 40 minutes and then returned to a very angry husband. I left before the aftermath. 3. One of the bridesmaids, a +1, not even family, turned up in a white dress. Bride was fuming and the bridesmaids were digging at her all day. White dress woman got mad and at about 9 p.m. had enough. Went up to the bride on the dance floor and confronted her. Bride immediately punched her in the face. Husband left early. Honestly, I reckon I have 50 more. Weddings are mental. Next story. The husband had his entire 10 10-person comedy troupe as the groomsman and the female member of the troupe as a bridesmaid. It was a freaking comedy act starring groom and groomsman instead of attention to the vows. Marriage lasted about 6 months, and then the wife learned husband was screwing the bridesmaid comic. God damn, those people were toxic. Oh yeah, a second wedding. Bride got so crap-faced she was walking down the stairs to do the first dance and just kind of melted down and sat on the stairs. Started slurring and crying while about 100 people waited for her to make up the remaining 10 feet to the dance floor. Husband had to roll his eyes and scoop her up and kind of carry her down to dance with her for the first dance. The party wrapped up, and as I waved goodbye, the bride was sitting on a nasty LA sidewalk with her feet and the bottom of her dress with the nasty water running over them in the gutter of the street, crying, kept falling backwards on the sidewalk. That one lasted an impressive 7 years. It finally ended when her brain basically stopped working from drinking so much and she was pounding vanilla extract in rehab. Next story. My parents attended a wedding of some friends around the same time as their own. The two couples had been in the same ballroom dance class to prep for their respective first dances. The other couple, mainly the bride, got really drunk between the ceremony and the reception. By the time the reception started, she was pretty belligerent. In the middle of the first dance, she got angry at her new husband for being a bad dancer and ditched him on the wedding floor. She walked over to my dad and asked him to dance instead. The groom sheepishly asked my mom if she would dance with him, and to help count the beats. Shockingly, the marriage didn't last. Next story. The bride's dress was completely wrong. Think Romani Sweet 16 level 10 embellishment in bright white satin for a modest afternoon budget wedding. It had a long, wide, hopelessly wrinkled train, huge bedazzled wings on each shoulder with full lace mesh sleeves. Hair and makeup were non-existent. A struggle bun and a swipe of red lipstick. A veil plopped on top of her head like a fountain. Nobody said anything, but she looked like she'd been up all night, woke up late, threw it on, and ran up to the aisle. No mirrors at any point. A couple hours before, the bride's mom, in full hysterics, had literally threatened not to attend unless she was allowed to walk her down the cramped aisle, which the bride didn't want. So mom was beaming. Bride was just getting through it. The bride laughed when they got to the honor and obey part. The groom's brother officiated. Reception was Olive Garden catering for over 200 people, half of whom were minors. Chaos. The bride and groom played some Louis Armstrong and Nat King Cole for the first dances before some old aunties bullied the DJ into playing Electric Slide basically the rest of the night. To be fair, they were both freshly 19 and they thought they had it all figured out, but the wedding was like riding a skateboard down a mountain. Neither family helped with the wedding prep. This was before the internet, so I'm not even sure how they pulled it off. In any case, it was clear they were going to be completely on their own for the marriage part. It lasted 4 years. The pics still make me cringe, especially my damn dress. Fortunately, my current fiancé is not a wedding person. We are just gonna go somewhere and pay someone to make it all happen, and nobody is invited. I can't tell if OP was trying to reveal that it was their wedding or not. Like, the end kind of made me think it was their wedding, but also it doesn't really specify it anywhere, so I don't know. Next story. Bride found the groom with the maid of honor, her sister, in the disabled toilets. She stabbed him in the head with her stiletto, went and pushed over the wedding cake, then told her relatives what had happened. Her father, uncles, brothers, cousins all started to punch up with the groom's family, and pretty much everything that could get broken did. It was a Greek and Macedonian wedding, and the marriage didn't last the reception. It was annulled. Next story. The table centerpieces were betta fish. 1 per table. Half of them got eaten. The other half were murdered with spoons. I kidnapped the one from my table and took him home. The entire scenario was amusing to the bride and groom. They split up like 2 to 3 years later, but they kept getting back together and splitting up again. I went no contact, as groom turned out to be a predator. Alright, so the fish, what do you mean? Half of them were eaten. What do you mean the other half were murdered with spoons? Like, this was just independently thought of by each table of wedding guests? They were all like, yeah, you know what? I hate betta fish. Or, you know what? This betta fish is looking kind of good. I don't understand. This doesn't say anything about the actual marriage to me, just that the guests were freaks, dude. What? Next story. At the reception, the DJ asked the couple how they met so he could introduce their first dance. The bride grabbed the mic and told this super romantic story about fate, timing, and knowing instantly. The groom took the mic after her and said, we met on Tinder. I was supposed to actually meet someone else that night, but she canceled. The entire room went silent. The bride laughed, but it was the tightest smile I've ever seen. They argued outside before the cake cutting, divorced in under 2 years. Next story. When on the way home from the reception, the bride told the groom, "I want a divorce. You are not moving in with me." It was a setup for her to steal the wedding gifts and some of his money he had just been willed by his father. Not to worry though, it was mutual. He was marrying her to have a house for his 2 young daughters. When she went to pawn the engagement ring, she was mad to find out it was cubic zirconia. He sued and won and put a lien on her house. She sold it without any issues. She had a friend who worked in the courthouse and passed over the paperwork when the title insurance company for the new owners did their check. He got to tell the new owners they had purchased a house with a lien on it. When I went to help the groom retrieve his belongings on move-out day from her house, which was actually a misnomer, she had never let him move in, and all his crap was in the garage. She had it all in a huge pile in the driveway with a positive pregnancy test balanced on top. She had inked in the positive result. We had a police escort for this whole event. Her ex-con boyfriend was hiding in the house at the time. His car was parked at the next block over. I have this all on videotape. Good times. Side note, a mere 2 weeks after the wedding, the groom called a meeting at our house for an important announcement. My wife's mother guessed tearfully, "Do you have cancer?" My wife said, "Are you declaring bankruptcy again?" He looked at me and I asked, "Are you getting a divorce?" I won. There were plenty of signs. Next story. The groom insisted that the wedding needed to be in Latin, some Christian thing. The vows he wrote mentioned that the woman's place is in the home and to be subservient to him. Apparently, that was a surprise to her as she was a hospice nurse with a great career. The look of disgust on her face as he spoke definitely told us what she was thinking. Didn't last a year. Next story. The groom and best man decided to pull a prank that ended up with the bride falling into the pool. The groom was laughing while father of the bride and uncle of the groom pulled her out. Uncle of the groom punched the groom. Groom said it was just a joke. Fortunately, this was at the reception, so it wasn't a big wedding gown bride was in. She was in a mini dress for the reception, but the dress, her hair, all of it ruined. She got the marriage annulled. As far as I'm concerned, that marriage was annulled before it even happened. I'm surprised it even did, to be honest. Surely, when you get pushed into a pool, you fall into a pool because of a prank, you just, call it off. But hey, I don't know. I've never been married. Next story. I once worked retail with a new coworker that invited me to her wedding 4 months after being hired. 4 months of knowing me at all. Her uncle had a restaurant that they would use for both the ceremony and reception, so I just figured she was inviting everyone she knew for a massive shindig. Unbeknownst to me, the night before the wedding, the aunt of the bride had been disinvited as she was obnoxious and nobody liked her, except her sister, the mother of the bride. In anger, she decided she would not attend her own daughter's wedding, and apparently convinced the bride's entire side of the family, except the uncle hosting at his restaurant, not to go. The groom's entire side of the family, hearing of this, also decided they would not attend. Nobody told me this, and in retrospect, I'm guessing my socially oblivious self was the only person not to clue into the tempers and dynamic of these families. Nobody else showed up. I arrived at the restaurant as the only guest to a wedding of a coworker I'd only known for a few months, and because most everyone had canceled, the uncle decided to open the restaurant to regular customers after vows. It was me, the groom, and the bride in full wedding dress surrounded by casual diners out for Saturday dinner. We didn't keep in touch, but from what I gather from chatter, they didn't last a year. Next story. My cousin's girlfriend became trapped in the restroom stall because the bride barreled in screaming, "I'm gonna end him!" trailed by her sister. The groom had shoved cake in her face and hair and needed to clean up. The girlfriend was very shaken by all the violent vengeance being sworn and stayed hidden the entire time. Anyway, the bride and groom almost offed each other, but not before a child and a really messy divorce. Next story. She thought the wedding was ruined when the DJ played Rock Lobster. Anyone who thinks their entire wedding is ruined over a song, let alone Rock Lobster, puts way too much emphasis on appearance. She also kissed him too hard at the rehearsal and knocked his front tooth out, so that totally could have been the first sign. Next story. The groom showed up drunk or high. I was young, so all I could really tell was he was on something, and his pants kept almost falling down. down. Not related to how long they would last, but definitely memorable for a kid who spent the entire ceremony wondering if we would see his underwear. He barely looked at his bride, mumbled through his vows, and barely hung out with her at the reception. Even I knew that relationship was headed to the dumpster. I also had 2 high school friends get married. The groom got drunk at the reception and passed out. The bride and I and another friend somehow got him to my car. I drove him and the bride to their hotel, and we struggled to get him up the stairs and into bed. But we all knew that one wouldn't last far before the wedding. They had a few kids and eventually split up. Next story. I've told this story before, but it begs to be told again because the couple didn't even make it past the ceremony. Old money on both sides of the altar. However, the venue was a random church in the middle of absolutely nowhere. For some reason, the space was set up to have a reception first, with tables surrounding the aisle. The main course, bafflingly, was soup. The bride is absolutely gorgeous. Designer ball gown, iridescent veil. Meanwhile, the groom could only be described as a ginger pimp. Yeah, hat and all. It's when they get to the exchanging of rings that it went completely off the rails. The bride was looking an interesting mixture of angry and nervous, like she was wondering what the hell she was doing. Then a close friend of the bride showed up and got into a massive fight, verbal then physical, with the groom. Most guests took this as their cue to get the hell out of there, which is a shame because it was explosive. The friend actually tried to give a love confession at some point, the groom yelling over him. The bride apparently had enough, ditching them both in what was supposed to be the getaway car. Next story. A childhood friend of mine grew up in a similarly conservative home, and her family kept hounding her about being unmarried at 30. So, as these things tend to work, she married the first person who offered. She was given absolutely 0% input over the wedding. Even her dress was obviously not her style, and she was visibly uncomfortable in it. To make things worse, the groom was very bothered by the fact the reception started a bit late because he had a flight to catch later that night with his friends, without her. It only got worse from there. She fled after 9 months. He also gave her trouble during the divorce process, going missing for a few months before being tracked down. Poor woman. She deserved so much better. Next story. The bride was braiding the groom in the hotel hallway the night before the wedding because he had a beer at dinner. All the wedding party members could hear it. The best man actually asked the groom if he was sure he wanted to do this. The groom was my older brother, and he's still in the middle of a contentious divorce. Don't marry controlling women with the daddy issues. Next story. They met 2 weeks prior to the engagement. He got caught embezzling funds from his job at the age of 24. They got married while he was in bond from jail awaiting trial. Turned out she was already pregnant. They didn't even know she was pregnant at the time either, but she was so in love. Did they last? Not even to their first year. Baby was born after their divorce was finalized. Later, they had a second child. She was one of the wildest people I've ever known. I fear for those kids' lives. Next story. During pre-Cana, Catholic, we were chatting with the sponsor couple about this. We were a little older. They said they definitely see couples who are not a good fit. There was one in our group we were pretty sure they were thinking of. It was pretty clear it was her wedding and he was just a spectator. Sad. Next story. It's always the aggressive cake smash. There's a massive difference between a playful boop on the nose and full-on tackling your spouse into a $500 pastry while they're wearing $2,000 of hair and makeup. If you start your marriage trying to publicly humiliate the person you just vowed to protect, you're basically counting down to the divorce lawyer's first retainer. Next story. Traditional Indian wedding. Gorgeous bride. Got up from the ground to walk around the holy thing as part of the wedding ritual. Her long skirt/gown fell down. Everyone was mortified. Super traditional and keeping up with the Joneses type groom's family never got over it. Groom had no opinions, just whatever his parents wanted. I think this is quite a funny incident, and the divorce saved the bride from a crappy marriage. She is very happily married and has a lovely family. Groom is on his 3rd marriage. Next story. First of all, they were both 18, which I've actually seen work out quite well for some folks, but it's obviously going to be more difficult than full adults getting married. Second, the bride's parents showed up late and drunk. Third, the groom forgot his vows and forgot about the first dance, so we had to go get him. He didn't want to set down his beer. Weirdly enough, the thing that finally broke the marriage permanently wasn't the groom's fault, directly at least. About 5 years later, someone sent the groom a video of his wife sleeping with a drug dealer in exchange for drugs. The person that sent the video did so because they were tired of watching her kid while she got high. It was just clear from the beginning that they weren't on the same page and would likely grow to resent each other, but I didn't expect addiction to come into play too. Next story. The wedding video shows a young bride making her entrance. gliding down the aisle with a practiced smile. She never once looks toward the groom. Her attention sweeps across the guests, pausing to acknowledge each admiring face as if she were stepping onto a stage rather than into a marriage. Every gesture is outward, every smile meant for the audience. The groom stands waiting, hands clasped, trying to look composed. The camera catches the exact moment something shifts in his expression, a small tightening, a flicker of confusion, maybe even hurt. It's the look of someone who senses something is off but can't yet name it. While she basks in the spotlight, he stands there like a part of the scenery. Years later, after the marriage finally ended, people began telling him what they'd seen that day. Friends, family, even guests he barely remembered. They all described the same thing: how she seemed to be performing and how he looked sidelined. How the imbalance was visible even then. Everyone had noticed. Everyone except him. Only when he watched the video again, older and finally free of the fog he'd lived in, did he see it clearly. That 21-year-old groom wasn't a partner in her story. He was just another prop in the production she called her life. That man was me. 3 kids and 8 years in court, with the judges telling my ex that she has no valid claims and will need to pay for the legal fees if she brings me back into court. Borderline personality disorder's a female dog. Damn, I wish someone had told me to get out way sooner. Alright, I don't know if my brain is poisoned, but look, I saw M dashes in this one, and I don't trust it. The actual story part of this one, the 90% of it, is written completely differently from the last paragraph, where OP is just talking about, that was me. Like, we're talking perfect grammar, M dashes, as I said, everything spelled correctly, and then this dude comes in and he types borderline wrong. Court is capitalized for some reason. Ellipses has 4 periods. Look, I think this dude used AI to write his story. It may still be his story, but it just takes away from it for me. Next story. Once the vows were said and the minister said, "You may now kiss the bride," the groom kissed the bride, then immediately started walking back down the aisle towards the back of the church, leaving the bride standing by herself at the altar. He was halfway down before he realized it. That was not a good sign. They were together for about 10 years and 3 kids. I guess that's a pretty good run, all things considered. Next story. My cousin's wedding. The best man kept saying how he hoped Blake and Kathy would be happy together. He said the name Kathy 3 times. My cousin, the bride, is named Mary. They lasted a few years. Everyone at the wedding reception figured the best man was drunk, but the groom is now married to Kathy. Next story. Not exactly at the wedding, but a buddy of mine and his girlfriend were constantly fighting. One day he came back to our apartment and said that he had to tell us something, but did so in a way that we were expecting some sort of bad news. Then he just sighed heavily and said, "We just got engaged." They lasted 2 years. Luckily, no kids. Next story. The groom was a coworker and friend of my wife. When I first met him a year or 2 before the wedding, I thought, this man is gay. I don't have any bigotry towards gay people. It's just a thing where you can tell sometimes, body language, clothing choices, whatever it is, etc. But my wife told me, "Oh, no, he's got a girlfriend. They live together." And I thought, oh, my bad, guess I was wrong. Cut to the summer before last, my wife and I are guests at the wedding. The groom and my wife were no longer co-workers, and they weren't all that close of friends, but I guess she was invited for old time's sake, and I was her +1. I suspect we were also invited because we were married. Most of the other guests were in long-term relationships or married, not many single people. I was acquainted with a few of the other guests. We were all part of an extended social circle, but barely knew the bride and groom. They're doing their vows, and I'm thinking, I know this man is marrying a woman, but damn, if he doesn't seem super gay. Look, I need to stop making assumptions about people. Clearly, I don't know what I'm talking about. A month after the wedding, she left him. My wife says there was no information on either of their Facebook pages, just that they weren't together anymore. My wife is not the kind of person to get nosy about other people's business. She won't ask them directly. Officially, we have no idea why they split up a month after their wedding, but I have a theory. Next story. When the bride walked down, the song they had played had the word angel in it, but suddenly the song skipped and became super chopped and screwed like a 2005 Houston rap song. Or, put a different way, when a character in slow-mo yells, "No!" really slow and exaggerated in a show. Anyway, the song hung up on the word angel. real low and slow for like a whole 10 seconds. It sounded like The Exorcist coming out of the speakers. My wife and I already knew this gal was a no-good succubus like that South Park episode, so we grinned at each other like it's one last call from God, or the devil, from beyond to cancel the ceremony. She was sleeping with her personal trainer the whole time. Marriage lasted about a year. Next story. She was dumb as rocks, a math wizard, PhD rocket scientist smart, with the shrillest voice that didn't help, and from an extremely wealthy family. He was something out of Trailer Park Boys, could have been Julian. The wedding was the entire local botanical garden on the water. It was out of a TV show awesome. Half the crowd super conservative, the other half Florida Trailer Park bikers. The mom-son dance was Dear Mama by Tupac. We all just looked up and shot a, did they just pick a song that mentions mom smoking crack in the lyrics? Look to each other. That was the moment. The entire event was weird, but the song was the moment. Didn't think about her for years, and as you guessed, they divorced and she went to help start Moms for Liberty. Turned on the news like 10 years ago and there she is. It sounds insane just thinking about it. Next story. I had to deliver bridesmaid's dress to my wife in the bride's suite, thinking I'd only be there a few minutes. The bride tells me how great of a guy I am, and she can't believe how nice I was to deliver the dress for one of the bridesmaids. Just a really interesting 4 to 5 minute conversation, singing my praises, finishing with a big hug. Meanwhile, she was in a thong. Just a thong. Next story. My sister joked several times the whole evening that this was great for her first wedding. It was probably just a joke because it seemed like something you'd avoid saying to not jinx things, but she told me years later that she knew the groom had cheated on her in the past and she married him anyway. 10 months later, it came to light that he had been sleeping with his parents' secretary for several years. He filed for divorce and married the secretary. Next story. Bride's father in his speech insisted that everyone had to sing happy birthday to him. Groom's mother then followed with a tirade on groom's father, who she was divorced from, and how her family were jealous she had all these male suitors. Rest of us looking on in horror. A month later, groom found out bride was sleeping with everybody but him. Thankfully, he divorced her, cut contact with his mother, and found a great new partner. Next story. So many things happened. First, my aunt, her 4th husband, decided to marry on Christmas Eve. The guy had some mental deficiency. He wasn't stupid, he was just mentally 10 in a 40-year-old's body. The preacher, not JP, who showed up on Christmas Eve, said at the small reception, "You can always get an annulment," not once, but several times. He said it jokingly, but come on. The marriage didn't end, really, just sort of disappeared and we didn't talk about it. Sort of like the brother in Happy Days. Next story. 1. At the wedding, about 5 drinks in, the bride and I were dancing. She asked how much I would give him for his gun collection, as now they were married, there would be no guns in their house. He had an extensive collection, including an old Sharps, like, I kid you not, probably $45,000. Very extensive considering he was 29 at the time. 2. Groom said, "Once I decided I didn't want kids, I realized I could marry her," when he was asked by some people how he knew she was the one. 3. Found best man and a maid groomsman, a lady standing up with the groom, making out. No big deal until the groom got super angry. Turns out he was jealous. Turns out he really had a crush on the bridesmaid and it just blew things up. She had always been in a serious relationship, so he settled. And then when he realized she just wasn't into him, it torched everything. 4. During speeches, the maid of honor said, "We've been through so much. And I know when she divorces your narcissistic butt, I'll be the one she calls." 5. The groom got angry because people kept taking his plate of food away when he was called away for photos. He kept trying to eat and drink a beer, and the venue people kept taking away the plate and beer because it was unattended and therefore needed to be moved. He absolutely lost it after 2 hours during the reception. Bride insisted he was ruining everything, and he said, "Look, it's my wedding day. I spent $5,000 on food and booze. Why can't I sit for 15 minutes and enjoy a beer and a plate?" I was the groom. Next story. The groom kept hitting on the special singer, who was the bride and her family's favorite local artist. Looked like a hot mother I'd like to, in her 40s. He decided to introduce the singer himself and thrice mentioned how glamorous she looked in a 60-second intro. To top it all off, after she finished her 3 main songs, he got hold of a mic and asked if she would do the honor of having a dance with him to see, quote, "if you dance as beautifully as you sing." The whole gathering watched awkwardly as they danced for 5 or so minutes, and it was, let's say, a very passionate performance. The bride, to her credit, kept her smile and didn't react, but all the non-family members at the wedding talked about how interesting the groom's hand placements were. They divorced 3 months later. It seems to have happened on a cruise ship, possibly part of a delayed or extended honeymoon paid by one of their relatives. She caught him banging one of the bartenders at night and demanded to be let off the ship. Next story. Now, I'm a big partier, and my wife told me at our wedding, "Just this once, don't get really drunk, you know?" And I said, sure. So at the reception, I had like 1 drink, I nursed all night, and that was it. We had one of the best weddings I've ever been to, and everyone agrees. Reading this thread, it seems like 99% of the problems start with, so-and-so was crap-faced drunk or blackout drunk. Just chill for 1 day if you want a good wedding. It's not that hard. Next story. It was a Monday night. They did the ceremony on the beach and then sent the guests away for 3 hours while they took pictures. Then we reconvened for the reception at a different location. Literally nowhere to go. No cocktail hour, nothing. Just to like, please leave, we'll see you later. So my husband and I went home, watched most of an NFL game and ordered pizza. We almost didn't go back. They're divorced now. Next story. Groom's mother cut in on the first dance as husband and wife. Bride just went and sat down like she knew it was going to happen and there was nothing she could do about it. 8 months later, she moved out of state. He moved back in with his mother, who made him give away their dog. How I knew them? I was their dog trainer. Bride did try to get the dog back, but the family that adopted her had children, so she ended up just saying goodbye and sending holiday presents, but left the dog with the new family. I believe there is nothing more evil than giving a dog up for adoption that is owned by not just you. You are basically ripping away someone's child. Like, how emotionally insensitive can you be? Dude sounds like a piece of work for sure. Next story. Wedding was outside and couple decided on a flat spot for themselves. They set up folding chairs for guests on a downhill slope. People's chairs kept folding in on them, and the ceremony was also filled with all kinds of awkwardness, including her parents not being able to thank my parents for hosting. They literally could not make eye contact with them. Marriage did not last. Phew. Next story. Proposal and then wedding within a week. Small group of friends and family pulled together. Bride cried through the whole ceremony. No one knew why it was happening so fast, but we suspected unplanned pregnancy. They'd only dated for maybe 2 months. Turns out, no, she wasn't pregnant. She was about to travel back home after college and didn't want to live that life anymore. He loved her, proposed, and thought they would see what comes next. 30 years later, 2 kids, still married. We all, family, friends, were sure it wouldn't last a year. Next story. Only person on the groom's side to show up was his mom and dad. When his mom was asked why even his own brothers weren't invited, groom's mom says, "Well, you just don't know how we felt. We didn't want him to get married." She had over 200 people. 6 months later, she shows me and another person a black book with names, scores, use your imagination, dates, times. This girl is a straight up hoe. Marriage lasted 3 kids, but he lived with his mommy for most of it. Split ways within a year. Divorce was apparently not an issue, probably still legally married. He's living with his mom as a 45-plus-year-old man and 2 of his grown kids, and she is in prison for the next 15 to 30 years depending on behavior. Next story. I used to be a server, then promoted to wedding planner. The craziest one was the bride got obnoxiously drunk, disappeared for like an hour. Guests started noticing the father of the groom disappeared as well. They both show up wasted. The bride is hammered with the back of the dress half unzipped. She made her way to employees' smoking room in the back, and we were all trying to get her out, and she was saying, "Quick, zip me up before my husband sees." At that point, literally everyone saw it already. Some lady zipped her up. She came back to the party for a cake cutting and started throwing fistful pieces of cake at all the guests, groom, and the staff. I had no idea what to do. Next story. The subtle one I always notice is when one partner is constantly checking their phone during the reception while the other is trying to engage with them. Not just once or twice, but repeatedly through the night. You can almost see the pattern that's going to define the next few years. One person always half present, the other always slightly disappointed. The dramatic stuff like drunken speeches is obvious, but the small disconnects are the real predictors. Went to a wedding where the groom spent more time talking to his college buddies than his new wife. She kept finding him, trying to pull him into conversations with her family, and he kept drifting back to his group. Divorced within 2 years. Next story. We were young and dumb. I smashed the cake into his face like so many do, and he was furious. I found out later his mom and sisters were too. Right after that, we had our first dance, and he outright glared at me the entire time in front of everyone. I was humiliated. One of my best guy friends from high school gave me a hug at some point. He berated me about these things the whole way to our hotel. I went to get cleaned up, and we got to the hotel. Came out to see he had fallen asleep. We had, waited to do anything intimate until after the wedding. He was annoyed that I woke him up. That day, I felt we were destined for divorce. It's been 15.5 years, but somehow we're still together. If I had a spine back then, we wouldn't be. The first couple of years, he was verbally abusive and emotionally abusive as well. But we fought and learned and grew. He had to learn a lot. We're better now. He's a wonderful husband and father. I still feel damaged and am trying to figure out how to heal. I get nervous telling people all this because the last thing I want to do is give false hope or encourage people to stay in abusive relationships or situations. My biggest piece of advice is don't get married young, and if you wouldn't want someone to treat your most loved sibling or friend the way they treat you, then run. I'm just going to echo what OP said, I think, because OP's story is miraculous. Them working out is incredible. I would wager the vast majority of abusive spouses are not capable of learning, at least not while in a relationship like that. Most typically, people like this who do learn and get better do so away from the situation, not while in it. This is like my favorite bit of advice, but when someone tells you who they are, trust them. Next story. Pastor forgot her name. Pastor and her father both got lost on the way to the church. I don't even remember if they had rings. There was a lot of crying, some yelling, a few slammed doors. It was wild. All of them attended the same church for the past 15 years. She cheated within 2 weeks. He flat disappeared. Divorce had to wait for over 2 years because she was a minor. She got emancipated via courts under the stipulation she marry the guy, per her mom, or go to juvie for 2+ years, per judge. But she was not allowed back in her house. She attempted annulment, and because she was, quote, fully aware and they consummated the marriage, she had to get a divorce. 35+ years later, 2 divorces, she's still single and still miserable. Next story. At the cake cutting, he punched her in the face and broke her nose. She stabbed him with the cake knife. Both wider families had a pathetic alcohol-induced mass brawl. Other people on the beach who were not part of the wedding also joined in because fight. There's footage somewhere of police just watching them all while eating some of the wedding snacks, waiting for everyone to get tired before arresting them. I took a whole bunch of youngins who were freaking out a bit down the beach for ice cream instead. Marriage didn't last long. Blame game from both sides has angrily lasted for 30+ years. Next story. I knew it wouldn't last before the wedding because they were both awful people who fought all the time. He bought her a Jeep when money was already stupid tight. They invited us over to eat and their house was wrecked, clothes all over the place. The kitchen was cluttered with the dirty dishes unrelated to the meal we were eating. Shortly after we left, she found a hair tie and accused this ugly, unfunny, broke fool of cheating. Highly unlikely. Not impossible, just highly unlikely. It turns out it was her daughter's hair tie. On another occasion when they were at my house, this motherfricker bombed my guest toilet while we were all in the living room. They lived less than 10 minutes away, so he could have gone home and come back. About 10 minutes after he left the bathroom, we were sitting outside by then, he asked when my wife and I met. My wife is 1 year younger than me. We were 28 and 29. She looked 21, so she joked that she was 21, even though he already knew I was 29, and that we had met 6 years prior. This piece of crap said, "Nice," and then added that he wished he had met his fiancée when she was that age as well. He was already 6 years older than her. Then he let it slip that some girl, yes, a 13-year-old girl in his church made him promise to marry her if he never got married. Yeah. When the wedding actually rolled around, I didn't even go. I was watching their dogs. My poor wife, however, was duped into paying $1,000 for the bridesmaid brunch for everyone. That was on top of the massive headache of getting her bridesmaid dress altered, and to make matters worse, she got into a car accident heading to their wedding. After they finally tied the knot, I told my wife we needed to cut off the relationship. I didn't want to deal with that mess anymore or constantly have to give them marriage counseling advice. Anyway, according to the laws of projection, the wife was the one cheating on on him with the security guard at the school where she worked. To top it all off, she tried to get his condo in the divorce. Apparently, that was the play all along. Next story. When she told me that she isn't happy about getting engaged after her longtime partner proposed, despite her giving him hints to not buy a ring. And then I kept suggesting she ought to think it through and talk it with a psychotherapist. She kept saying that there's still enough time. The best thing about the whole situation was that I got an official invite to the Prague Castle to speak to the local Catholic Church authority during their marriage annulment. That was very cool and interesting. Next story. The wife had appendicitis and a kidney infection the day before the wedding and told no one. The groom told his mother, who literally told everyone at the ceremony against the wife's wishes. Also, the best man, the groom's brother, felt it entirely necessary to mention how much fun they had paying for strippers together in his best man speech. Aunt of the groom told the bride it wasn't a big deal. Boys will be boys. It's me. I was the bride. Fortunately, I kept my appendix because I caught it early enough for antibiotics to save it, though antibiotics could not save the marriage. Okay, I always wonder for you guys listening, is it weird when I say stuff in my normal voice like, it was me, I was the bride? 'Cause I don't sound particularly bridely, but when it's OP, I just use my normal voice. When stuff is quoting people, that's when I do the voices. But is it weird? I don't know. Either way, probably not going to change. So at least I hope it's funny. Next story. My awful wealthy cousin got married to a really nice guy. At their wedding, which was held outdoors in the courtyard of a huge mansion during her part of the vows, several hundred crows started calling all at the same time. They were all chilling in a huge tree overlooking the courtyard and only made their presence known when she started speaking. When she said, "I do," over 100 crows took flight from the tree all at once, circled the courtyard calling crazily to each other before finally screwing off. They divorced a year later. Next story. Went to the wedding of one of my really good friends once. I'd never met the groom but had seen some pictures and knew his name was Casey. The wedding took place at a public park on a Saturday, so it was fairly busy. My sister and I arrived and we were greeted by a guy we didn't know coming up and with the most hateful and disturbing tone saying to us, "Can I help you?" We were both thrown off and kind of froze. I managed to stammer out, "Jessica's wedding?" He immediately lightened up and looked relieved. He said, "Whew, good, I've been chasing people off all day. I'm Casey, by the way." Like he said, he was literally going up to everyone who wasn't a wedding guest within 500 feet of the area and rudely telling them they needed to leave. A group of people who were rightfully mad were screaming and blaring their horns as they were driving away. In the background, pretty far away, there was a group of people clearly doing a photo shoot. He went all the way over there to aggressively demand they leave because there's a wedding going on. He did the same to an old lady walking her dog in the distance. Already not a good first impression of this guy. During the kiss, the bride grabbed him and passionately gave him tongue. Of course, they also smashed cake in their faces. During the reception, Casey would go over to the phone and change it to the next song before the last one was finished playing. He did this with every single song. Needless to say, they did not last. Next story. The groom wouldn't take off his sunglasses for the ceremony. The D-bag kind with the neon rubber stuff around the back so they would float if they fell into water. Another groom changed into cargo shorts and a baseball jersey immediately after the ceremony before pictures. Black tie wedding. Different groom kept having to remind the secretly pregnant bride not to drink. She cussed him out repeatedly, got drunk anyway. Complained she was going to do something fun that day. Drink. And obvious green card wedding. Groom kept complaining about taking pictures. Bride kept reminding him that they needed proof that the wedding was sincere. Groom got caught making out with his best man before the big exit. Next story. Went to a wedding in college. The bride was quiet, smart as hell, and a very good overall person. The groom was, loud, crass, often way too drunk. In minute defense of him, he did spend time in Iraq/Afghanistan as U.S. infantry. He did shots prior to walking down the aisle in a conservative church, swayed through the vows, and got even drunker at the reception. He kept going to do shots with the guys in a supply closet while the bride danced with her friends. To close out the evening, he crapped his pants on the dance floor. Oh, and did I mention that he was wearing his army dress uniform? They were married something like 3 to 5 years. I remember being surprised surprised they made it so long. Next story. I can only tell you what I've been told and what I found out myself. I was there, but not in a situation where I could remember. It was my parents' wedding, and my mother was expecting me, which, as far as I could tell, was the whole reason to get married in the first place. Back in '79, you could fool around all you liked, but if the lady ever got pregnant, you had to take responsibility. Most stupid reason to get married ever. It dooms the parents to a miserable marriage and the kids to parents who had nothing to do together. They got married when my mother was 26. She was a widow, so he was her second husband. My father was like 2 years younger, something like that, I'm not sure. He didn't stick around long. The wedding was basically both of them in everyday clothes and the two legally required witnesses for the paperwork. He was a drunk, a liar, a cheater, and a crook. He had lied to my mother about having his driver's license temporarily annulled before they met for some road offense. The truth was he was drunk as a mule and ran over some guy while driving. The man, a father of 2, died instantly. My mother found out when she went to do the paperwork for him to retrieve his license and was told he had to get a medical exam. Why? Well, given the circumstances, it was legally required. They were, of course, already married. She was none too pleased. Then the guy cheated on her. He was with his mistress when my mother was in labor for the birth of my younger sister. She found out he was cheating later because he was supposedly at work. She called to ask him something, no cell phones back then, so she called his workplace, only to be told he had taken a day off. She confronted him and kicked him out. He took literally everything in the house with him, quit his job so he wouldn't have the money to pay for the mortgage and everything, never paid the alimony he owed either. The marriage itself lasted 3 years. The divorce took an additional 6. His family lied to the judge, saying the neighbor had moved in the day he had been kicked. For completely unrelated reasons, that bastard ended up in jail, then out of jail, tried to run a liquor store which ended exactly as you imagine, then back to jail. Then other shenanigans I didn't care much about, never had any contact with anyone in my father's family. It's not just him that abandoned us, it was everyone on his side. I was 4 when my mother kicked him out, and I never saw him again. He called twice in my lifetime, and one of those times he was, of course, completely drunk. As far as his side of the family is concerned, I only ever had a few talks with a distant cousin on his side in 23, because in 2023, he died. This 60-something man was living with his mother because he was unable to care for himself. He had been convicted several times for minor scams, possession of explosives, identity theft, and of course, driving without a license. His mother was basically keeping watch, but old age and illness happened, so he drank even more than usual, fell to the floor headfirst, and died just as he lived, without any dignity whatsoever. Good riddance. I might have gone a little too far in the story, but it's a good example of what happens when people who really shouldn't get married anyway, and I kinda needed to get it off my chest. It turned out for the better, though. I'm not a drunk, I'm doing well enough, which might not have been the case if that man had been around to raise me, but I was well over 30 when it finally dawned on me that I'd been abandoned. People, please, don't do this. If you feel like you really shouldn't be marrying that person, then don't. Or if you do, please, by all means, don't bring kids into that mess, because what starts with a crappy wedding turns into a freaking origin story for the kids who have to live through the aftermath. Next story. People probably thought this about my wedding, mostly because I looked miserable and wasn't partying or having fun. Really, it was because in the middle of the rehearsal dinner, I suddenly was hit with the worst toothache in the world, and during the wedding, I couldn't eat or drink anything without being in excruciating pain. I kept sneaking off to my car to just scream and punch my steering wheel, which hopefully no one else saw. I had some old painkillers that I put in my pocket, but I didn't want to have a foggy memory of our day or be too out of it, so I didn't take those until my wife and I got to our hotel room. People suggested whiskey, but everything hurt. When we went for our honeymoon, I took off the first morning and found a dentist to just pull the tooth. I then enjoyed the rest of our honeymoon, and we've been married for just shy of 10 years. Next story. I've got an old army mate who is as mad as a hatter. A bunch of us went over to France for his wedding. Proper fairy tale setup. Small, quiet town, rented castle, the works. Night before the wedding, we head into the local bar for a couple. He's loving life, catching up with old battle buddies. His fiancée sensibly suggests he might want to head back because, massive life event in the morning. He refuses. She backs off. Her friends, however, decide to step in and encourage him to call it a night. He did not respond well to being managed. Some choice words are exchanged. He eventually rolls back into the castle at about 5 a.m. huge argument kicks off. Future mother-in-law walks in mid-explosion and he absolutely detonates the situation, announces he hates all her friends, calls the mum the C word. Anyway, wedding goes ahead. Massive party, speeches surprisingly heartfelt considering the previous evening. Then at some point during the night, the groom finds a shotgun somewhere in the castle. I may have given it to him. He proceeds room clearances. At one point, he sticks the barrel in his sleeping father-in-law's mouth to wake him up. A few other completely feral things happened that night. Affairs, arguments, but nothing topped that. They're still together. 2 kids seem happy. Best wedding I've ever attended. Next story. Groom's speech at a 400-person Australian-Italian wedding. Thanked all the family who'd come. His parents, friends who'd come from Italy, the bridesmaids who looked gorgeous, and especially the matron of honor who just told him the, quote, best man fricked my new wife last night. Mic drop and walked out. Chaos. Absolute chaos. I did not know what accent to give this guy, so I did probably the worst Aussie you'll ever hear. Enjoy that. Next story. I went to a wedding where my friend's formerly, quote, gay son was getting married to a woman. The best man, who was the groom's former partner, got up to give the toast and announced to the room that they were once a gay couple, among other things said. The bride had no idea, nor did any members of her family or friends. My husband turned to me and said, well, this should be interesting. I didn't know if I should laugh, cry, or be afraid. Like most people, I just sat there with my jaw hanging, not knowing what to do. Next story. When the bride, a friend, said the groom wanted the wedding itself, she wanted courthouse or backyard, but the groom actively avoided any wedding planning and never got excited. Bruh, it was your idea. He complained the entire day, too. They divorced not long after she had their kid, and he turned out to be jealous of the demanding needs of the baby since he's a giant man-child. Well, great news. There's a song for that. Not specifically that. Look, it was a bit of a stretch just off the last word. Anyway, that's the last story for today. This was a long one with a lot of different stuff going on. I don't know why, as a human, I like hearing about stories about weddings going wrong. I don't think that makes me a bad person, just morbidly curious, maybe. But I hope you had as much fun as I did. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.